Okay, welcome back. You may be, yeah, you're familiar with this model that we have laid out here, the SEIR model, and we've talked about the flow um, of going from the population going from one pool to the next, and the coefficients A, B, and C, and why we have the product of I times S to govern how quickly susceptible people are becoming infected. So all of that has been laid out. But there's something that, given the current circumstances, we need to take into account. A is not a constant, or it's maybe I should say is a changing constant. Okay, so as we heard news of COVID-19 back in January, we as a country did practically nothing about it. So it wasn't until later on in the month that there were some travel restrictions from China, but we didn't have travel restrictions from Europe. So very little was being done. Okay, so there was sort of an initial phase, um, which where we did almost no intervention. So we'll call that the pre-intervention phase. Okay. During the pre-intervention phase, we probably had an A value. I'm just going to say that it was 4, right? Which means that every week that somebody was infected, they were, let's see, how would that work? We would have, this is 4 per week. So every infected person was basically when the susceptible population was everyone, would have been infecting about 4 other people per week. So there are lots of theories about what that rate actually is. The data is fairly sketchy because of the limited testing data, especially early on. So we don't know exactly what that number is, but probably in the range 3 to 4. So each person who is infectious is walking around and probably infecting 3 to 4 new people every week pre-intervention. So that means there were, nothing was being done. Okay, and then we did begin to restrict things like the flight restrictions, starting in late January and into February. Some travel restrictions went into place, but things didn't really get serious until basically our spring break when the school shut down. That's when the state of New Jersey, which is, we're going to focus in on New Jersey. That's when the state of New Jersey became serious about stopping this. Okay, so pre-intervention, we had a very high A. Then we went into an intervention phase. All right, we had stay-at-home orders, and during the intervention phase, the A value dropped way down, and we've seen the effect of it. We're sort of still in the intervention phase, so that A value was able to drop pretty far down. And so we actually saw the infections, instead of shooting up exponentially as they had been, we saw them beginning to level off, and actually they're coming down now. Okay, so we had an A. Now the interventions varied in terms of they didn't all happen at once, and things like parks were closed a couple of weeks after the stay-at-home orders went into effect, and and now parks are open again. But we basically, up until about now, have been in pretty strict intervention stage, where maybe A is something like zero point 0.8. Okay, and that might explain why the infections are coming way down, because that means for every infected person, we're roughly, they're only affecting 0.8 of another person. Okay, so one person is infecting less than one other person per week. And so we actually see the infection rate dropping rapidly. Now, once again, we don't know exactly what that A value is, but 0.8 wouldn't be a bad guess as to what we may have been able to drop things to during our period of strict executive orders or emergency orders, where we've had to stay at home and not really do much of anything except go to the grocery store. Okay, so that's the intervention stage, right? And like I said, this number is, it kind of goes up and down a little bit depending on what was happening. And intervention wasn't clearly defined exactly as a specific date. but we can pretty much mark that right at the beginning of our spring break as the beginning of the intervention period, right? And now, as the numbers are clearly coming down, things are loosening up. Okay, so I'm recording these videos in advance, but yesterday on the radio, the governor had announced that non-essential businesses could start curbside pickup. And so we're kind of slowly opening things back up. We don't want to get back to the pre-intervention stage A value, because if we did that, um, we would see just an exponential growth all over again, and we would have, and we have more cases now than we probably did um, back in March when we began taking measures to slow things down. So if A ever went back up to 4 or even 3, we would be in big trouble for a while. So we're in sort of what I would call the opening up, maybe just opening phase or opening up the economy phase. We need for people to be able to go back to work. Unemployment is through the roof. And eventually, if we don't have an economy that's working, food won't be grown or delivered. It would be a tragedy, a big mess. So we do need to open up, and government officials, even the most conservative in terms of concerns for the health of the country, are saying we do need to open up. They're just, the debates are about how much and how soon. All right. So this would give us another A value. Whoops, pardon me. Maybe this gives us an A value where we clearly need this to be bigger than the 0.8. But maybe this goes up to something like 1.4. Okay, so this is just a hypothetical. It's kind of a range. We can't have it go up to probably anything over 2, or we'll probably have a disaster on our hands. So we can open up, let things happen, but we still need to take careful precautions. We need to do things probably like wear masks in public for a long time to come. We might not be able to go to the movie theater. You might not be able to go to an NBA game with 10,000 other people because we need to avoid large gatherings where people could be spreading things rapidly. Because whatever happens, we don't want to go back to the original A until we have a vaccine that would prevent the spread. So we're going to have different A's. We'll call these A1, A2, and A3. So we can be more subtle, and you could have like partial openings and then open more and more as time goes on, or maybe you open, realize things are getting out of control and you need to tighten up again. But we're basically going to have, we have 3 periods. The pre-intervention, where we basically didn't know we had a problem and did nothing about it. The intervention phase, where we've realized we had a big problem and we did a lot about it. And then the opening up phase, where we know we have to loosen our restrictions if life as we know it is going to resume. In order to have any semblance of an economy, we need to allow more things to happen. So we need to open up again. All right. So what we'll do is we'll program these things into MATLAB, and we can then see what happens if we play around with those numbers and model different scenarios with those numbers.